Welcome to SSI Meetup. Today we will be talking about Decentralized Key Management System, DKMS, which is something that Drummond Reed has become an expert in the last couple of years, and he will be talking about this today. And in the second slide, I will just summarize quickly the main purpose of what we're doing here at SSI Meetup, and for the people that have joined us already before, they will remember that at SSI Meetup, our purpose and what we're trying to do here is basically to create a global community of people that want to learn about SSI, that want to share knowledge about SSI, and to do that, we share all this material with the Creative Commons by share alike license, which allows everyone to reuse the material that we're publishing. And each of the guests we have shares his slides, Google Slides, with us, so that all of you can use them. And that basically means, for example, if you want to talk about DKMS anywhere in the world, you will be able to use these slides in such a way that you just have to credit SSI Meetup, and in this case Drummond, with the presentation, and then you will be able to reuse the slides. And the idea is that corporations, NGOs, people, communities around the world will be able to use this and then kick off their own local communities in the space. And the subject of decentralized key management is really interesting because this is not only relevant for the SSI space, it's relevant overall for the whole crypto space, because it's one of the big challenges about how keys get shared and how to recover your keys. And this is something that Drummond will be sharing with us today. For anyone who didn't participate already before, and Drummond also did our first webinar about the open protocols for the SSI space, where he summarized some of the key aspects. And then he did another one about DIDs. I highly recommend both of them. And today we will be covering DKMS, and tomorrow we will be covering trust frameworks with Drummond, and we will have as invitees also CU Ledger, who will be explaining their own trust framework and how that works. But today we will be concentrating on decentralized key management. And Drummond, the floor is for you. And if anyone has any questions during the presentation, please just share your questions, and I'll be bringing them up to Drummond to answer them. All right? So Drummond, all for you.
Thanks very much, Alex. It's great to be back here and talking about another one of my favorite subjects. And I do encourage folks to, if you find yourself really interested in DKMS, to see those earlier too, where we talk about the whole open standard stack for self-sovereign identity. And I'll actually be reviewing that at the start of this because I want to make sure everyone has the context for exactly what DKMS is doing. And so again, this is identical to the start of those other two, but I'll put a little bit more emphasis on the preparation for DKMS. So in the first model of digital identity that we had before, in the early days of the internet, I'll put it this way: every identity that you created out there was an account on some website or organization or application. And that's led to the huge proliferation of username and passwords and much of the pain that we feel here today. But even just to get that far, I like to point out it still took about 7 years of work on standards for actually just having encrypted connections, so it was safe to share a password on the internet. So a lot of work went in just to get to that first step. Now, to try and ameliorate the pain for all that, we evolved to the second model known as IDP, or the federated model for identity. And there, what you tried to do is have a single account or a limited number of accounts with identity providers that then turned around and provided the login or the identity data sharing with all the organizations that were part of that federation or used that identity provider. This is, of course, very common now in many businesses and large organizations that have single sign-on internally. And on the web, it's the model we use with what's called social sign-on with Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and everything else. When you see those, log in with Facebook buttons, that's what it is. And I like to point out that's actually been through 3 generations of development of standards for interoperability around that. First SAML, and then OAuth, and finally OpenID Connect on top of that. And it has made an impact. I mean, those standards are used in a number of places where the IDP model works. But a couple of challenges of the IDP model. One is there's no federation that includes everyone. You can't use Facebook to log into your bank. Secondly, they're limited by what services or policies of any one IDP. So they really aren't very adaptable into the many different needs we have out there for identity and authentication and authorization. And thirdly, they're not portable. Your account with one IDP and all the organizations it uses is not portable to another IDP. You're locked into those. And if you lose that relationship with the IDP, you lose all of those logins and identity relationships that you had. And that's what's moved us forward into what's now emerging as a self-sovereign identity model, where we're back to just you and the other party, whoever that peer is. It's a peer-to-peer model. And notice in a peer-to-peer model, you don't call it an account when you develop a relationship with someone, you call it a connection. And so in the SSI model, it's all about the connections you have and then what you do with them. Now, what makes it work is that you're going to establish an identity and then establish a relationship and then develop an identity and prove that trust using digitally signed messages, and the digital signatures are going to be verified by the blockchain. So the key to what makes a self-sovereign identity model work is that you, as the identity owner, have a digital wallet, and it's going to have a set of credentials in it, just like you have with the wallet that you have today, the physical wallet. Now, where do you get those credentials? Well, they're issued by other peers who are trusted to say something about you. You can issue your own credentials. Those are called self-issued. They can be very useful, like a business card. But if someone really wants to know that you work for that company, it's even better to get a credential from that company that's signed by them with a public key. They can be verified on the blockchain. And then if you wanted to actually go someplace like a bank to open up a loan, you could present that credential for them to verify, and they could verify it using that signature on the blockchain. So in a nutshell, what you're seeing here is this is the one single picture of what is self-sovereign identity. It is as decentralized as the identity system in your wallet or purse today. Those credentials, anyone can be an issuer, anyone can hold those credentials that qualifies them, whoever issues them, and they can be presented to anyone to verify. And there is no central authority controlling the whole thing. And what we're reproducing now is we're bringing that online. So what was your wallet in your pocket now becomes a wallet on your phone or tablet or PC or wherever. And to do that, there are 4 emerging standards for this whole space. One of them is that how do you actually address and verify those public keys on blockchains? That's the DID, Decentralized Identifier standard that Alex was referring to earlier, this whole webinar on that one. Secondly, DKMS, that's what we're going to be covering today. How do you manage the keys, the private keys for that in an interoperable way? Then there's one called how do you authenticate with peers once you've established a connection. That's called DID-auth. And lastly, of course, the standard for verifiable credentials themselves so that they're interoperable and will work with any wallet and any issuer and any verifier. That is a working group of the W3C. So I'll just quickly summarize these for anyone that's seeing this for the first time. Again, the lowest layer is decentralized identifiers. That is at W3C in the credentials community group. I am the co-editor of that specification. Then we have what we're going to talk about today, DKMS, and I'll talk more about standardization at the end of this webinar, but the goals for that to go to OASIS. Then we have DID-auth, which is a working group at the Decentralized Identity Foundation. I'm on the steering committee there, and it's not sure where that's going to go. It might be to IETF. And the verifiable credentials, again, is a full working group at the W3C, and I'm a member of that working group. It's moving very quickly. So again, our focus today is going to be on this one. We're going to cover DKMS. Now, in order to do that, though, DKMS is literally part 2 of the work that started out on DID. So I'm going to quickly review, again, even if you saw it before, I want to make sure I review what is a DID, how do these things work, because it's going to make DKMS a lot easier to understand. So first of all, here is what one form of a DID actually looks like. This one is actually for the Sovereign Identity Network. That's what the SOB stands for. You see the DID, that's all DIDs start with DID colon, then what we call the method name Sovereign, and that is a Sovereign DID. And it's true of all of them, and Sovereign specifically, you have a DID as soon as you generate a key pair, because what a DID is, it's the address of a public key on a ledger someplace. And I say a ledger ledger because it could go on a public ledger, it could go on a private ledger, it could go on a micro ledger. We'll have another webinar about that at some point. It doesn't matter. It is the address of that public key, and you have the private key. And two really important points about this. One, that address doesn't change, but the keys can be what they call rotated. You can change keys over time for security purposes. Generate a new key pair, give it a new public key, and you have a new private key without changing the DID, without changing the identifier you're using for a relationship. So so DIDs really are an advance fundamentally at the level of public key cryptography and mostly the usability and scalability of public key cryptography, and that's why they're central to all of what we're doing. Now, you can see from this screen, you can just look at this and go, oh, I'm never going to memorize all those unless you are truly, have eidetic memory or something. So how are you going to manage all these? Well, you're going to use the same devices most of us use to manage address books today. And that's especially important because unlike many types of identifiers, you're not going to have just one DID. You are going to have thousands of them, and that's because you're going to have one per relationship. If we don't want to be correlated the way we are today by government ID numbers, or especially our mobile phone numbers, we need pairwise pseudonymous DIDs. We need one per relationship. And that is the standard, for instance, the Sovrin Foundation is adopting with the Sovrin network. Now, this is particularly important because every DID, if you use a relationship specific, behind that is a lifetime encrypted private channel with the person or organization or thing, connected thing you're connected to, like a car, like your refrigerator, like your toaster, like you name it, whatever it is that you are connecting to and authenticating to with your self-sovereign identity. It's got a DID for you, and you've got a DID for that. So with that proliferation, now we can really pump up the problem. Well, how are you going to manage those DIDs and private keys? And most importantly, what are you going to do if you're going to lose them? When I talk to people about DIDs, at beach parties or cocktail parties, the very first thing is I get in my wallet and I explain, yeah, we're taking your wallet, we're putting it on your phone. And the very first question is, well, what if I lose my phone, right? Well, we're going to answer that here today. And that's all of what is behind DKMS. It's the whole reason we've been working on it. And again, I'll give you more history about this standardization at the end of this. Let's just dive into it. So what is it? Okay. So yes, it's one of the emerging open standards, and it is all about managing DIDs and private keys and doing so in an interoperable way. Now it applies. When you think DKMS, it applies to your wallet, your self-sovereign identity wallet. That's where you store your DIDs and private keys and some other things we'll get into. But it also applies to the agents that read and write from those wallets. Agents are the term used in decentralized identity infrastructure for being able to, for how you actually connect and communicate in a secure way to form a connection, to authenticate, to do authorizations, to share data privately. So DKMS is as much about the agents as it is about the wallets. Now, again, the whole point is, how can we have a standard for wallets so that if you, as an ordinary individual using the internet, you don't have to, it's like HTTPS, the lock in your browser, what tells you you have a secure connection with the site, that you can, in 999 out of 1,000 cases, you can be confident you're not being snooped on that connection. Well, this is how can you have a wallet that you're insured? You don't have to worry about the security or privacy characteristics of the wallet, and you're not going to be locked in to one wallet from one vendor. And if you hear the term wallet today and you think about mobile phone, you're almost exclusively talking about proprietary wallets that do lock you in. So DKMS is about getting out of that and moving to open interoperable wallets. So I want to go deeper in that to really understand. So what do we mean here, and what do the DKMS standards actually cover? So I've used this diagram before. The bottom layer of this stack that we're building is DIDs on any blockchain that supports them. Now, what I'm going to show you next is 2 layers of these agents and wallets, and I'll explain why in a minute. Now, it's the edge agent layer that is actually used by the identity owners in self-sovereign identity. People, organizations, I'm not showing a connected thing here because it really fits right in, but it's people and organizations that use the computing devices, and that's where the interface is that they actually deal with. By definition, that's the edge of the network. And it is the safest place to put your private keys for your DIDs and to manage those identities, because A, it's on a computing device you own and control. Doesn't mean it's entirely safe. That's a whole other subject. But it is, it's a lot safer than being out in a server someplace where it's open to anyone to try and connect to an attack 24 hours a day. However, the problem with, being at the edge is that you're not always online and you don't have a lot of computing power and you're not connected 24/7 with high capacity pipes. So for the same reason that we use email clients that connect to email servers, or we use web browsers to connect to web servers, we have a cloud layer of agents, and they have wallets too, because at a minimum, they need to sign or prove things about themselves, those cloud agents, as they move messages around. And we'll also get to a second key function that they help with when we talk about recovery. So this, again, two layers: the edge agents that you run on your devices, whether it's your mobile phone or your tablet or your laptop, or in a corporate situation, a server behind a firewall is still an edge agent. It's at the edge of the self-sovereign identity network. Edge agents always paired with edge wallets. Cloud agents, as I said, could have very minimal wallets, but in some cases, when you need them to act on behalf of like an organization, they may have a more full-featured wallet in an HSM, hardware security module, is typically what they'll have. And the whole point, again, of DKMS is to say, let's develop a standard for interoperability of these agents and wallets at the edge, but also in the cloud. And that's why it ties in so closely with DIDs, but also with the higher level standards that we're developing for DID-auth, for DKMS, for self-sovereign verifiable credentials and self-sovereign identity protocols. So that's the big picture. Now let's dive down a little bit further and talk about what actually goes in a DKMS wallet. And I'll pause here just for a second, take a sip of water and ask Alex, any questions so far?
No questions so far, no.
All right, very good. Let's dive down now and look at what does go into a DKMS wallet. In this particular example, I'm just going to show a phone. Of course, this again can be any place an edge agent operates and needs a wallet. And you'll have thinner wallets and you'll have thicker wallets. But on a typical smartphone, that's where I think many people are going to want to have the maximum control and accessibility of their wallet. So the very first thing, of course, is your DIDs. Every time you create a relationship, classic example, you take your smartphone and you will do just what you do when you board a plane. You will show a barcode, a QR code to someone to form a connection, another individual, or you'll do it, we'll talk tomorrow about doing that at a credit union, and literally going in, and there you're standing before a teller and there's a QR code, and you go, yeah, I want a connection with my credit union. You open your wallet, you scan that QR code, bingo, you have a connection with that credit union. Doesn't mean you have a credential yet. That's a second thing coming, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. The credential credit unions are, but that's the first thing is, as you establish those DIDs, now every DID is associated with a key pair, and this obviously is where you're storing those keys. So it is definitely a cryptographic key wallet in the sense we use wallet, but we're not done yet, because this wallet also knows where your agents are. This is how, for non-correlation, you don't want to share the same DID anytime you don't absolutely have to. You want pairwise synonymous key pairs so that you're not only non-correlation but higher security, but you want your endpoints to be unique too. That means those agents up in the cloud that are going to be listening for you to any communications, they all have unique addresses. From your standpoint, it looks like one, but to the rest of the world, you're not one. You look like every relationship is unique, and therefore you have that whole set of endpoints, and you know what they are, but no one else does. Okay. Now we've got another key thing that we'll cover in a future webinar. I don't know, Alex, if you've done anything on link secrets yet, but they are the key. If you're sharing credentials using zero knowledge proofs, as we do with the Sovrin protocol, then you also have something called link secret, which you never share in its blind form. It's in its direct form. You always blind it, and it's a way you can prove that any credential and any claim on those credentials belongs to you, regardless of who issued it. Then, of course, credentials. As you obtain credentials or you issue them yourself, they typically will also become a wallet. Now, some vendors, there's terminology involving what goes in a wallet versus what goes in a vault, something that's protected by those DIDs and key pairs. Sometimes you'll see that those things will be going in vault. Certainly, if you're going to start putting in files or MP3s or things that you want protected, but you don't want inside your wallet, those will go into a vault. The last thing that you're going to start to see, even though we're talking self-sovereign identity here, is yes, you will see cryptographic tokens. You will see the associated key bearers for those. And as I like to point out to folks, if you talk about a wallet today, do you use it for identity or do you use it for money? Well, of course, you use it for both. They're both important. They both have a root of trust, which is you, and you need to take care of both of them. And the same thing will be true here. And of course, there's, I think one of the key features over time of DKMS wallets is that they will not be specific to one token. They will be interoperable with multiple types of tokens. And what you'll have is a combination of ability to prove your identity and ability to share value or exchange value in the same wallet with the same agent. That's a whole dimension of where we're going with self-sovereign identity that I'm not sure folks understand, and I'm certain we'll be having more webinars on. Alex, you'll be having more on SSI Meetup on that subject over time. All right, I'm going to pause again to see if there are any questions about these 6 categories of things that are going to be stored in DKMS wallets.
Yeah. No, nothing so far. I'll let you know because it pops up here on my screen, and I will interrupt you if there's anything.
Excellent, very good. All right, so now I like to point out when people are trying to understand why these 2 layers of agents. One of the key reasons, one of the problems that the cloud agent layer solves is how do you have wallets on multiple devices, right? For the same reason that I, for instance, use encrypted messaging clients like WhatsApp or Signal on all my devices for convenience. Well, those have to also be using encryption keys, and I need them on all my devices. I want all my messages that I'm sending, I want to be able to write a message on one device and then go and take up the conversation on another device. Well, the same thing is true of your wallets. And cloud agents provide a way to do that. We don't call it synchronization because you're not actually synchronizing the keys. The keys are unique to each wallet. The DIDs are shared across the wallets, but for security purposes, you don't want to share keys across wallets. But that's one thing that cloud agents solve. The other one is this huge question around, what if you lose your wallet? What if it's compromised? How do you handle backup and recovery? And that's the key thing. You know, everyone who comes to DKMS goes, okay, I get it, I want an interoperable wallet, but how does this problem get solved in a way where we can really take one of the oldest usability problems in all of PKI or cryptography is how do you have these keys, these wallets that are obviously going to be quite large in terms of at least the volume of keys in them with what we're developing with SSI and all uses of blockchain. And everyone, ordinary mortals, are able to manage those keys and recover them. Now, with DKMS, that was one of the key focuses, as I'll talk here, in the work we did in the design of the standard, including working with BYU's Internet Security Research Lab on the usability of these options for recovery. And there are 2 main methods. There are other methods. There are biometric recovery methods and some other more exotic forms, but the 2 basic forms of recovery are generally referred to as offline or paper wallets or hardware wallets, and then social recovery among a set of trustees. So I'm going to take a minute just to describe each of these, and so it's clear what DKMS is doing in those areas. Okay. Now I'm going to point out both of them use cloud agents for a specific purpose, but the most basic thing is here with that cloud agent, your edge agents that are maintaining, that are adding DIDs, that are using keys, that are adding and inserting credentials, they can maintain continuously a backup copy of the wallet that is encrypted. So it's not available, it's stored in the cloud, but it's not available to anyone except for you because it's encrypted with a special recovery key. And I want to make sure this is clear. We'll go back to the identity stack picture and just make sure you understand what's going on. So again, you're using the edge agents. That's you as the identity owner or an organization using its edge agents, edge wallets, and engaging in interactions. What's going on is they are maintaining a backup copy of that. We're all, I'd be amazed if anyone is listening to this webinar who's not using cloud services on a daily basis. A lot of folks don't realize if you're using, something like Google Docs or Google Slides that we're using here, every single keystroke is sent to the cloud. That's how efficient it has become and how scalable it is. So maintaining an encrypted backup copy of your wallet in a system that's designed to do that is not a complex task. Again, the crypto that lives to do that encryption is the heart of what's going on here, these edge agents and edge wallets. So maintaining that of your cloud agent across multiple sets of multiple devices and used by identity owner, it's not a big deal. The big deal is what happens if you lose, you lose that ability at the edge. Now, the first thing I want to point out, I don't show it here, but if you imagine a person and they have multiple devices and they lose one of them, well, if all of them are maintaining an encrypted backup copy in the cloud, then recovery is almost trivial. You get a new device. Let's say you lose your phone, right? You drop it overboard when you're out visiting on an island like I am this week, and you get a new phone. You download a wallet application. You're going to reconnect it with your own cloud agent. There's a specific process for doing that, obviously very securely, but it is similar to how you set it up to begin with. And what you do is you authorize it from one of your other devices. So you literally are reconnecting it into this whole thing, very strongly authenticating it so it's safe. And then once you've done that, you're downloading the backup copy of the wallet, and your own recovery key is known to your set of devices, so you can recover your wallet away you go. So it's not too hard if you have, yeah, go ahead.
Just a question related to the subject. And Bart is asking, is there standard security model for the cloud agents inherent to the protocol?
The short answer to that is yes. They will be. You can use different encryption standards for the cloud wallet, but your edge agent is going to know which one. And I suspect that what we call agencies that host cloud wallets, if you're doing it commercially or open source software like Hyperledger Indy, will support multiple of them. Today, Hyperledger Indy uses ED25519 elliptic curve cryptography for encryption. But they're actually moving at Hyperledger to a standardized crypto wallet, cryptographic library for all of the Hyperledger projects there, and it will support all the major. So the SECP 251K standard used by Bitcoin and Ethereum, the elliptic curve 25519 that I just mentioned, RSA, of course, and new ones as they come along. So yes, it's going to be a feature, I think, absolutely of commercial agencies to have, basically the strongest encryption that they can for maintaining that backup copy. And again, if depending on your own security model, an organization may turn around and say, we're going to maintain our own backups. They're not going to be in the cloud. They're going to be someplace else. That's totally fine. And you can run your own software if that's, if that is better for your security model. I'll stop there for a second. Any other questions on that, Alex?
That seems to be all for the time being.
Okay. Now, again, so this feature, the key thing I'm driving towards is okay, what happens if you lose all of your edge agents? If you had only one and you lost that, or you had several and you had what happened to me is when I had all my devices stolen from a car in San Francisco a couple years ago. You have to recover all together. And that's where what happens with that recovery key is critical. So in the last sections here, I just want to explain that and then talk about standardization. So again, of these two basic options for the recovery key, one of them is offline recovery, in which case you're going to use either paper or sometimes some. It's also, you can order metal based forms for remembering your key. And I'm showing here a QR code because it's a lot easier, you know, from a usability standpoint. But of course, you can also have recovery keys recovered via, you know, the full native string of digits or the classic 12-word recovery phrases. The various ways to encode that in a way, but that piece of paper then is the keys to the kingdom in terms of being able to recover from that encrypted backup. So it's important that you store it and protect it. And most importantly, what we found out working with BYU's Internet Security Research Lab is that one of the #1 issues is actually how is someone going to remember where that wallet is or where that paper, that recovery is, and do so over a long period like 10, 20, 30 years. That's one of the challenges that we see coming in terms of usability of this backup option. Now, of course, you can also do it to hardware, secure hardware that's going to be completely offline. In this case, I'm showing YubiKey, but there are many hardware wallets that are available to do that. Again, the same thing there is, what if that gets lost, right? If the key to unlocking, having lost the wallet some other way is lost, then you're really in a hard place. Now, those are some of the reasons. Obviously, this is when we did our usability research, we actually found that offline recovery options were currently considered slightly more popular than this other option of social recovery. We'll see as we move forward into the future whether that remains true. Social recovery takes a different approach to how you would recover that recovery key, and it uses sharding. Any cryptographer listening to this is going to recognize this, whether it's Shamir secret sharing or another form of sharding, to split your key into multiple pieces that you then share with trusted connections that we call trustees. And many words are used for this. We found the most popular one in the literature was trustee. So we use that in our DKMS design and architecture. Now you see all this in the simplified diagram of direct peer-to-peer sharing, but in the earlier diagram, you see that in fact, it's another place where the cloud agents can really help, because one instruction from the identity owner here on the left to share this with connections she's established, you know, in DID connections, will actually go to her cloud agent and to their cloud agents. And if they individually say, yes, I want to be one of your trustees, that process can be automated, and that encrypted shard can be stored by their cloud agent. Think of it as an additional part of the package of backups that they're storing. So one of the big advances in social recovery here is standardizing the cloud agent infrastructure, because now what we're doing is we're using machines to automate and add security, and of course deep privacy. Nobody knows about this set of trustees other than the identity owner. Which actually becomes a challenge. How does the identity owner remember if she lost that phone, what trustee she needs to contact to recover her recovery key? And there are some usability, some interesting ways that we're coming up with for doing that, because one of the things about your trustees there are your connections, so the people you stay connected to. So one of the other ways we can help solve the problem is, as your connections evolve over your life, your edge agent, the intelligence there, can say, hey, do you want to add a new trustee? Do you want to evolve your set of trustees? And regular interactions, maybe every couple of months with the identity owner, will mean you'll always maintain a current set of trustees if you ever got in a situation where you lose your device, or there's a compromise of some kind and you need to go get that recovery key. So that's the basic architecture of social recovery, and I'm pretty bullish on it, because I do think that, again, the evolution of DIDs, self-sovereign identity, and the 2 layers of agents is going to make this a much more palpable and everyday usable option. There's a lot of work to do, and I want to again really thank the work of BYU's, as Brigham Young University's Internet Security Research Lab, that worked with us on the development of this, and is looking to do additional research in this area on usability, because it's the hardest part of security. So I'll wrap up here, Alex, by talking. Are there any other questions at this point?
No, it's fine.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to give folks some context here about the process, where DKMS came from and where it's going. So the origins of DKMS actually were in the contract that Evernym, originally Respect Network, my company was acquired by Evernym, had with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the Science and Technology Division, and its program manager, Anil John, to develop the DID standard, because Anil is one of the most brilliant people in digital identity that I know anywhere, let alone the government. And that's why he was selected by Homeland Security to head up identity and data privacy there and do the research on it. And he saw the potential of blockchain to solve this whole area. Alex, he'd probably be a great person, another great guest to have on SSI Meetup at some point. And so he sponsored that original research on DIDs. And as we were doing that, as we were completing the first 6-month contract to do that, everyone agreed that the next key challenge was the key management that would be necessary for DIDs. And we said that too needs to be an open standard. And so we did another 1-year contract with DKMS, with DHS, exclusively on DKMS design and architecture. And we had several subcontractors on that. Christopher Allen, who I think is also, he's been a guest here on SSI Meetup, or is he coming, Alex?
Not yet, he's coming in the future.
Good. He was one of our advisors on that. Mandy Sporny, Dave Longley at Digital Bazaar. So a bunch of us, really, and we held sessions on DKMS at the conferences in the space, IW, Rebooting Web of Trust. And so anyway, this I'll in a minute I'll provide the link here. So we finished that contract at the end of March of this year and published the initial design and architecture documents, Hyperledger Indie repo for public review. We announced that at IW 26 in April. Now, those documents that's one of the reasons I really want to do this webinar is we are looking for public review and feedback of those documents. And you can actually, you're welcome to contact myself or anyone else who worked on the research, or just submit issues or pull requests against the documents that are in Hyperledger Indie. And this is a nice short bit.ly URL for anyone that wants to go take a look at that. And we will be continuing to evolve them. So the plan going forward is to form a DKMS technical committee at OASIS, one of the leading internet standards bodies. And one of the reasons we're leaning towards OASIS for that's not a firm decision yet. I know that OASIS is very interested, and I've talked to the various developers and companies that want to move forward, and they're comfortable with OASIS, but it could change. But it is currently the home of what's called KMIP, which is the Key Management Interoperability Protocol. Another open standard is quite mature. I think they're going their 4th version of it. And KMIP is the equivalent of what we're doing at DKMS for centralized key management for organizations. It's a way that a whole bunch of applications within a company can solve that same problem of how can they have interoperable key management that works across all those applications without every single application having to do its own key management. So it is a very analogous protocol. I already have talked with KMIP folks that are interested in the synergy and cross compatibility with DKMS. So it's most likely where it's going later on this year, and you can of course stay current here. And I want to conclude here again by an official thank you to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and Anil John and his team for funding the research behind these. And they continue to do very cutting edge work that's underlying the open standards in this area. And I thank them very much for what they've done there. And with that, I'll turn it over to any other questions, Alex.
Yeah, no questions right now, but I have 2 questions for you. I mean, I think for any person who has been involved in the crypto space for a while, I mean, all these things are quite familiar, because, I mean, to protect your crypto tokens, you need to understand like the basics of what a private key is and public key and all that stuff. So if we take something like a ledger or like a Trezor, which are the 2 big hardware solutions to hold your private keys that have evolved over the years now, and which are popular with traders and or crypto holders overall, how does that fit into DKMS? Because I mean, my understanding is that we want to create a global SSI movement, it's probably unlikely that people will start buying physical hardware storage solutions like a Trezor or like a Ledger to hold the private keys there. Is that something you agree with?
Well, I think it's up in the air. It's a really good question because that is the preferred solution today because we don't have SSI infrastructure. We don't have DKMS yet. And I agree with you that I think it's unlikely that you know, we're going to go from almost no one or only a very specialized set of users that have those hardware wallets to suddenly everyone having a hardware wallet, right? Mm-hmm. Rather, what I think is that the average person on the street is going to say, well, I want this on my phone. I mean, I've got everything else on my phone. Why don't I have this on my phone or in my tablet, my laptop, or every place else? So what we'll see is the development, and that's, again, one of the reasons for DKMS is how do we do that in a standard interoperable way that's not locked in by any one vendor? So I think what will happen, Alex, is we will start to have interoperable DKMS wallets. I know, of course, Evernym is one company working on that. It's one of the reasons we did the research, but there are many others that are doing that. And what will happen is the hardware wallet vendors will actually turn around and say, oh, okay, I need to figure out how I plug into infrastructure that we're talking about here and become DKMS, you know, interoperable with DKMS. And so what they'll become is an extension of your DKMS, you know, what we often call your sovereign domain of the devices and wallets that you're using to, you know, manage your crypto life.
Okay. My follow-up question on that one would be like, I mean, is it correct if I would say that my big takeaway from DKMS is that if you use like a decentralized infrastructure architecture with cloud agents and edge agents, which allow you not to have to rely on a hardware solution and allows you to do sharding of your private keys with other people without other people not even having to understand what this is about and how it works. If once that gets really started, that's the key aspect of what makes DKMS really decentralized. Is that a correct explanation of how that is? Or my understanding is that everything else is like kind of an area that has been explored already. Of course, you can print your private keys on paper or use all the other traditional methods of how you can store your private keys. What would make it really special and unique, or the next evolution of this whole question, would really be the edge cloud agent infrastructure, which would allow you to store these private keys without having them stored in a centralized way anywhere.
Yes, that is absolutely right. And occasionally I get asked when I present those diagrams, it's like, oh, well, if I start using a cloud agent, am I re-centralizing everything with, you know, some cloud provider? Well, and I like to point out, well, not only, of course, can you run your own, but there can be, you know, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of service providers or options for those cloud agents, just like we have for email or you know, web services today. In fact, that's one of the reasons for the Hyperledger Indy project at the Linux Foundation is it is standardizing the code you need to run if you're going to be running, well, obviously a ledger like the Sovrin ledger, but an agency. You know, the host of a cloud agency, we use the term agency, and agency code is now, it's the fastest growing code at Hyperledger Indy. So any service provider that wants to get into that, and it, you know, it won't just be commercial providers, it will also be corporations will start running agencies for themselves, governments. We've already had, you know, interest from churches and of course universities and academic infrastructure. So the decentralization will be as decentralized, of course, I believe, as, you know, the internet or email or the web, and I'll point out without the legacy sort of non-decentralized point of all those was centralized registry services like DNS. We rely on those. With SSI infrastructure and DKMS, we've decentralized that. That's now public ledgers that themselves do not have that issue of centralization. So Yeah, that's you are right. It is the edge and cloud agents that are going to make they add that automation. They literally use cryptography and blockchain technology to decentralize and automate that process for key management.
Great. I have two questions that came up here as we were talking. One is from Bart. Oh no, he just asked another question. I got to ask the first question from Bart, which is on the topic of wallets. Do you expect DKMS to be part of SDKED into many third-party wallets for mobile, app service, or specific identity wallets?
The former, I expect it to become part of standard wallets and SDKs for wallets. That is what's happening at Hyperledger Indy with the Indy SDK. And I think it's headed in the same direction as standards like OpenSSI that just standardized, OpenSSL, OpenSSL, standard library for using SSL and TLS encryption. And I think we're going to head in the same thing. So it will be, the goal is, of course, anything that has a wallet that wants to be interoperable and not lock you in and say, yes, we meet these, the DKMS standards for security and privacy, that's why DKMS exists, is to do that. And, we have a ways to go, but I think the value is pretty obvious.
Okay, and Bart has a follow-up question related to this, where he says, can I use DKMS to make snapshots of my wallet, example, when I'm traveling to China or the USA? Part of the usability may be different versions of my wallet, depending on the policy. This could be highly relevant for healthcare, where consent-based systems don't really work, given the power relationship.
That is an extremely good question, and it has been discussed as an advanced feature of DKMS. I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be supported in the first version of the open standards, but I know that the same feature is one of the features of some password managers that you can both store a subset, and you can also have a service whereby you delete your password manager when you're traveling through certain countries that might, where there might be the need to expose, your mobile phone or devices, and then you restore it when you've done that. And the same when you travel through those, leave those jurisdictions. I think the same thing could absolutely be applied here, because these wallets, the reason I feel so passionate about DKMS is that the more of our digital lives become, these become the key to our digital lives, the more important they become. There's a whole, we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow with trust frameworks. It's not just about your current digital life, but this is part of your digital estate and legacy, right? Being able to unlock assets and funds that you, for instance, if you pass away, you want to be able to pass on to your spouse or kids or your estate, and there has to be a clear way to do that. And obviously, delegation and being able to share those, whether it's encrypted backups or have specific key delegation relationships, that all needs to become part of the infrastructure too.
Okay. Antonio's asking us, why not use biometrical information for the private key, and in this form eliminate the trust intermediaries?
Well, if you're asking about the trusted intermediaries being those cloud agents or the cloud agencies, the whole goal there is to have the minimal trust in that intermediary, as in their storage service, their message routing service, but you're not trusting them. They're as close to trustless as we can get them. So we're trying to eliminate untrusted intermediaries. Now, I mentioned earlier that I didn't talk about biometrics as a third, and I think very robust option for basically key recovery. And there is a lot of potential there. In fact, even the infrastructure we're talking about here of the offline social recovery, one of the options with social recovery is to have what we call biometric service provider as a type of trustee. So so that you are not just relying on known contacts, but you have a way of continuing to authenticate, even if you lost your devices, to a biometric service provider who could be a trustee. So it's being discussed, and if the market proves out that there's a biometric solution that is going to be both secure and private enough, then I think it would definitely become a whole third option for backup and recovery.
I see. What is, from the biometric information that you could use as data for your private key, what is the most reliable biometrical data? Because from what I'm hearing, it's not all biometrical data is reliable. So what is the most reliable one?
Well, I know I am not an expert on biometrics. I do spend a fair amount of time with those experts. My understanding is irises, iris scans are the most reliable, short of DNA itself. And I would be more than happy to recommend a guest for you, Peter Simpson, who's the founder and executive director of iRespond, which is an NGO that provides biometric identification for refugees and migrant workers and other at-risk populations. And currently, as I just talked to him the other day, about 170,000 Thai fishing fleet workers have iRespond biometric identification, so that it's to prevent slavery, human slavery, in the Thai fishing fleet. He is a deep expert in this subject, and I think he would make a great guest to talk about that for you, Alex. He's one of the trustees of the Sovrin Foundation, and he can go into the comparative, the comparisons and all the different options. Also, Jack McCullough at Veridium is quite good at that, but I'm a secondary, it's hearsay through me. There are a number of advantages I know from Peter to irises besides you don't have to have contact to provide an iris scan. In fact, it's getting scary how far away they can actually do an accurate iris scan now.
Interesting. I mean, Antonio was just mentioning DNA, but I think you mentioned that already. So, okay, I will follow up with you later on I think on this biometrics question, because this is something that will come up in the future. There's more questions coming up from Bart. Bart is saying, are there any working groups working specifically on the topic of consent? I think some trust cases might require things like multi-sig, example, to ensure patient, doctor, lawyer, client confidentiality, even though that might not be true SSI.
Oh, I want to say right away, that is absolutely an SSI use case. We show these connections, and one thinks they're all direct peer-to-peer, but as soon as a peer is a group of any kind, or you have a set of peers forming a group, and you need delegation or authorization to be shared among the group, you get right into those cases of delegation and group consent, and rig signatures and all of the things that those require. So there is, in terms of groups that are working specifically on consent, Kantara has one. I'm trying to remember the precise name. I think it started the information sharing working group, and then I think it evolved into the consent working group. Mark Lazar, Lizar, is I think the chair of that group. He's been very involved in that area for quite a while. And consent is obviously deep. It's become a very deep topic with the passage or the enforcement now of GDPR in Europe. One of the nice things from my perspective about self-sovereign identity infrastructure is that consent is, built deeply into the sharing of verifiable credentials. So consent, when needed, consent itself is a verifiable credential, self-issued. It's one that has to be self-issued because it's your consent. So it fits right within the infrastructure and is provable and auditable in the same way that everything else is, and it can be as private or as public as needed as well. And just like credential signatures can be ring signatures, multi-sig, so can consent. So I think it really does fit in. It's very central topic to SSI, and another good subject for a webinar there, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I have one more from Bart coming up here saying, also completely different question. Suppose there would be a breach of the key scheme. how would the process of resigning, rotating keys go? How would I know as an end user?
I was wondering who was going to ask that question, because it is one of the one of the hardest parts of security is if you are compromised in some way and the attacker does not, is good and does not want to reveal the compromise, then they can be hiding and of course trying to pick up as much information as they can before they surface. Some of the best, some of the worst cyber attacks out there have and use exactly that pattern, and sometimes they can stay undiscovered for years. I'm not going to sit here and say, as much as I work on these things, I'm not a deep, security expert, especially a black hat. So I don't know the best, the best answers for that. What I will say is the overall approach we've been taking with the edge and cloud agent architecture is to say that the same way that those kinds of security attacks and intrusions, there's whole industries for detecting them when they happen on a server side in an organization and within its, its own infrastructure or in the cloud. Those same detections can actually be used directly with edge agents and cloud agents. And a new sort of generation of them cooperatively working together can also be deployed. So basically you have those algorithms and detection patterns working within your own devices and your own agents on your own behalf. Now that's not a panacea. I think the other thing I'll point out is one of the strongest advantages, I think, from a security standpoint to the DKMS architecture is that the root of trust for an individual is going to be in their edge wallets, and edge wallets should be the deployment standards and the certification standards for edge wallets should be that they are deeply integrated with the secure enclave or trusted execution environment of the device. So the attack surface now for an individual is going to get way smaller and harder. It's not to say it's, there's no such thing as perfect security, but if an individual's ability to control their keys and a well-designed backup plan in case there is compromise of a particular key is put in place, it's just going to be a lot harder. It's going to, I mean, I don't know, myself, I believe it's a couple orders of magnitude harder than the infrastructure we have today. Even phishing attacks. I like to point out to folks that with SSI and DKMS and DDoS, there is conventional phishing is just a thing of the past. You can't get to anything with just knowledge of a data or a password. I think we're going to have a lot greater protection. It'll never be perfect.
Excellent. I'll have a last comment here, maybe. I don't know if it's the last one, but one more comment from Antonio. He's saying for recovery, I vote for blockchain that holds the IDs, but private keys must be controlled only by me. Any comment from you on that one?
Yes. I mean, unless you delegate control to someone else you trust, the only thing that should appear on the blockchain, especially a public blockchain, is a public DID and a public key. There are proposals for different things that private blockchains are maintaining. I've never heard one of it should be maintaining the private keys, but various forms of personal data or private data. And in general, I found this as the further along we get with this infrastructure that the rule is private data is it's not meant for blockchains. Private data is meant for wallets and peer-to-peer sharing between connections, and that's the infrastructure we're setting up here. So public data or shared data, it may not be fully public, but data that's intended to be shared, for instance, the credit union blockchain network, that's what you want for the for the ledgers and blockchains themselves. But everything else, it's private peer-to-peer sharing under private connections and protected by DKMS.
Okay. Maybe if we go to the next slide, you can warm us up a little bit about what we will be talking about tomorrow with trust frameworks and CU Ledger and why this is relevant.
The only reason I agreed to do back-to-back webinars, Alex, on the 2 days right before 4th of July is because you picked two of my favorite subjects. And so obviously I've spent quite a bit of time at DKMS and very excited about it. But literally my day job, at the Sovrin Foundation, I am one of the trustees, but I chair the Trust Framework Working Group. And so the whole topic of trust frameworks SSI is one that we could probably do 10 webinars on. But what I want to do tomorrow with you, Alex, is summarize what is a trust framework, why are they so, why are they a major element of the SSI infrastructure that we're building, but not just keeping the abstract. I don't want to take more than less than half the time to do that, because what I want to do is do an interview with Rick Cranston and Julie Esser, you see here, the CEO and Chief Engagement Officer of CU Ledger, which is the credit union consortia that is developing blockchain technology for the credit union industry worldwide, not just in the US or Canada, but around the world. And the first thing they are implementing is, in fact, self-sovereign identity, a credential called MyCUID, and it has an associated trust framework. So I want to get right down into, this is not in the abstract. I and others are working directly with them on the development of that MyCUID credential and the trust framework. And so I want to, be right down in the trenches and let folks hear directly from the team that's responsible for that and working with credit unions representing 250 million members worldwide. That's where we're going with adoption of this infrastructure. So love if folks can come, and looking forward to that tomorrow.
Awesome. So if we just jump to the last slide, thank you very much everyone who has been joining us today. Thank you very much for the great questions. As you know, you can sign up to the newsletter to be informed about any upcoming sessions we will be doing. Tomorrow we will have the Sovrin the trust framework session together with CU Ledger that Drummond will be leading. You can also join our Telegram channel, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. All those channels, we share all the webinars we will be doing. And as we said at the beginning, you can reuse this material. I'll be uploading the webinar videos. You can watch it again if you want to. And you can also reuse the slides using the CC by SA license, which basically means you just have to credit SSI Meetup, and in this case, Drummond, for sharing his slides with the rest of the world. So please make use of this. We love you when you do it. And Drummond, thank you very much. And we will be talking tomorrow more about trust frameworks.
I just can't get enough of SSI Meetup, Alex. So thank you very much for hosting this. Thank everyone for attending, and a great set of questions. It's a topic we could talk for many hours about.
Great. Thank you very much, Drummond. Bye.
Bye-bye.